Hey guys, welcome back. Patrick here. Did you guys read the Hindenburg research on Lordstown? I think it's time for us to acknowledge that SPACs are ripe for deception, and we rely very much on the sponsor. And so if the sponsor is not doing its job, we are pretty much at risk of getting scammed. So the report was absolutely crushing for Lordstown, and I have to do a mea culpa. I am always kind of skeptical about the company's projections, like especially if they're projecting 5 years down the road and stuff like that. So I tried to be as objective as possible, but I did not expect that it would be this bad for Lordstown. So today I want us to look at the report. What's wrong with Lordstown? What was wrong with Nikola? And what can we learn about these for the next companies we're going to be analyzing in the future? Because the last thing you want to do is invest in a company that's a complete scam. And then, of course, over time, it's just going to crash and probably at some point go bankrupt. So let's get started. This video is going to be very important. So please like and subscribe, and I'll see you right after the intro. Alright friends, let me know in the comments if you have shares of fried and if you were caught by surprise by this report by Hindenburg Research. I did not expect it. In fact, recently I made a video about Ride saying that I was looking to reopen a position after the big crash over the past few weeks. So thankfully for me, I dodged a bullet. I didn't reopen a position, but you know, I could have. And the big thing that I'm noticing here is that us as small investors, we don't have a lot of resources. We rely a lot on the investor presentations, the due diligence by the sponsor, and what's available in the media. Thankfully, there are companies out there that have a lot more muscle, right, and researching power. They have teams and everything, so they can actually dig much deeper than we can. So this is the case here. Hindenburg Research, for those of you not familiar, are the ones that discovered or exposed Nikola and that truck going downhill and all of that. So right now, short sellers are not really popular. People don't really like them, but you have to give them credit for exposing some companies that are borderline fraudulent or at least very deceptive. So Hindenburg Research, if you guys want to check them out, this was the Nikola one, but today we're going to mostly talk about the Lordstown Motors report that they just published this week. So Lordstown Motors Mirage, fake orders, undisclosed production hurdles, and a prototype inferno. So this is very, very crippling for the company, in my opinion. I'll go over some of them, and then I'll kind of extrapolate that to like the other SPACs that we know of, and how this is a process that keeps repeating itself, where the company is kind of trying to deceive the potential small investors like us. So the first one is going to be the fake demand, right? So usually they raise money by saying that they have a lot of orders. So in the case of Lordstown, if you guys remember, they claimed that they had 100,000 pre-orders for their pickup truck. And that's how they're kind of able to raise money, because for us, right, we see this as, okay, they don't have a product already in the road, they don't have revenues or anything, but they have a lot of demand for their potential product. So when you see companies that have pre-ordered from Lordstown, like Duke Energy that's on the S&P 500, then you have AEP, that's another big company, then you know you have all these companies that are believing in the product and making pre-orders. Well, you give that a lot of credit, right? It's pretty obvious. But here we have Hindenburg Research that figured out that most of the pre-orders for Lordstown are not real. They were so desperate to get these big pre-orders so that the CEO, Steve Burns, could use that to go and raise money and fund the project, that this opens up all sorts of potential abuse. So for example, they were paying agencies to try to do lead generation, and these agencies were paid $30 to $50 per pre-sold truck. But they weren't really pre-sold. What they did is they just almost made up these numbers. For example, one of the biggest contract for Lordstown that they used, and we saw it when we were looking into the company, right? A $735 million deal for 14,000 trucks from a company that was run out of an apartment complex by two guys. So not really a legitimate company. If you go down a little bit, you can see the guy here saying, they don't operate a fleet. We provide the fleet. It's kind of a hybrid of a lease, but it's not a lease. All right, you can see the type we're seeing here. Like, they want to be a middleman. They're ordering 14,000 trucks, but they have no money down. They don't really have any assets. You guys can see what I'm talking about. So this is the first thing that Hindenburg has actually uncovered, is that almost all of the contracts that Lordstown claims that they have, and that the CEO actually went on TV and said that they have, are pretty much fake. The company has no demand right now for its pickup truck, and you often hear fake it till you make it. Well, that goes to a certain point, but now it's going to be it is a publicly traded company. So deception like this is not okay by any means. A second big problem exposed by the report is that a lot of these companies, and in this case Lordstown, really exaggerate their timeline for production. So once again here, we're kind of depending on the sponsor to investigate this. And the company, when they tell us, well, we're going to be ready for production like in 6 months or a year, like we can't really disprove that. So this is a big problem, because in the case of Lordstown, when he was in Workhorse, he said that the vehicle would be ready for production in 2018. Well, now we're in 2021 and it's still not anywhere close to production. In fact, according to employees that Hindenburg interviewed, it's not going to be ready for 3 years if they ever produce the truck. So maybe they'll manage to pull out a miracle and actually get it on the road. But if we look at what happened with Workhorse, I mean, it's not like they have a big track record of success. All of those people that were associated with these different projects, including the CEO. Number 3, we have quality control, and this is another big problem because we don't get to test these products ourselves. We really depend on what the company says and what third-party people looking into the company report on it. So this is a huge problem. Look at this one where the vehicle actually burst into flames after 10 minutes of them test driving it on the road in January 2021. So it's pretty obvious that the company is nowhere near getting into production, right? If you look at the wreck, look at this, and think about the fact that a couple months ago, the Vice President of the United States was driving into one of these vehicles onto the stage, and then this vehicle was in front of the White House next to the President of the United States. Whether we like him or not, doesn't matter. The fact is, I mean, this is a ticking time bomb, and it's not anywhere near close to production. So that is another big problem that we have with SPACs that we're going to need to look into the future, is that unless they have a proven track record, right, and they do have the products. For example, if we look at Tattooed Chef, I could go to Costco, buy the product, and test it out myself. But this vehicle, I could not do that, right? So we have a big disadvantage for all of these companies where you can't actually test the product ourselves. Number 4, a lot of these SPACs make very bold claims about the technology behind their product, whether it's proprietary or if it's licensed by a third party. So in this case, they are licensing the in-wheel motors from a company in Europe called ELAF. So when I read the investor presentation, I looked up the company because I knew that was going to be a core part of the actual business plan, right? They were really going to depend on this company. So I looked up the website for the company. I looked up videos on YouTube. You know, you could see them working on the product. So it seemed potentially legitimate. You know what I mean? At least on the surface. But when you dig into it a little bit more, which is what Hindenburg did, you can see that the company is not really like... This technology is not proven and is not ready to be commercialized by any means. Not only can they not mass produce it yet, right? They're not even sure it's going to work. So the fact that it's unsprung weight, which a lot of people have been talking about this before, so that was known already. The fact that the weight of the motor is not above the suspension, so it's going to get all of the impact from the potholes. Apparently, it can even break if you hit the curb. You know, all sorts of problems based on the fact that it's not supported by the suspension. So again, this is the thing where we kind of knew a little bit about this. We knew it was a little bit more speculative, because they did not really have their own proprietary technology, but I kind of expected that they were a little bit more tested than they actually are. So again, mea culpa on my part, right? I'm like you, I kind of do my research a little bit, but we can only scratch the surface, and that is a big problem. Look at Nikola and all of the claims that they had made about their revolutionary technology, and they went on TV and they talked about it, and we can't really disprove it. That's the problem, until you have third-party companies like these that can interview the ex-employees and all of that, that actually tell them what's real and what's not. They actually interview some of the suppliers, some of the customers. that's when you know the truth. So a lot of times we can't really rely on what the company says anymore, and even worse, we can't even rely on what the sponsor says. A lot of times I relied on what the sponsor did is due diligence into the company, right? So he's the one that should be calling the actual customers to make sure that everything is legit. We can't do that. So that's a big problem that I'm noticing. That's number 4. All right, at number 5, last but not least, we have to do a much better job at looking into the management teams and making sure that they're ethical and have an history of success, not a history of failure. Let's be totally honest, the CEO, Steve Burns, I mean, he's never really done anything successfully. He founded Workhorse, and yes, it has become a big company, but they haven't had really any success producing anything, right? It's not like they are generating hundreds of millions in revenues or anything like that. The company is pretty much a failure, almost a shell. But it goes way beyond that. So look at this, right? So the company actually tried to poach employees from a third-party company to steal their infotainment system. So the incompetence goes so far that instead of just trying to do it quietly and not get caught, they actually emailed one of the employees their cost analysis of developing their own software versus stealing that company's infotainment system. So they were caught red-handed, right? So the company that's suing them actually has almost irrefutable proof that this really happened. So this is the level of incompetence and bad management that we need to be aware of. Now, once again, we run into the same problem I keep mentioning, is that we can't really verify that in a lot of cases. So when Nikola puts masking tape on the parts of the truck and then claims that they developed all of them, well, that's a huge red flag. But for us, we can't really know that, right? We only see pictures online. So that, once again, is on the shoulders of the sponsor that did not do proper due diligence. But also it goes beyond that. There are some cases where we do see these red flags and we need to be more aware of them and not have blinders on. Most of the time we only want to see positives and we kind of ignore the red flags. In my review of Clover Health, I mentioned that Vivek Garipalli, the CEO, is a get-rich-quick type of guy, right? He bankrupted 2 of the hospitals, or whatever number of hospitals that he had before. He's been investigated by some of the authorities there in New Jersey, right? There were a lot of red flags, and still people did not believe it. They just did not want to believe that there were other better opportunities, so a lot of people lost money with Clover Health, and right now it's not doing that well. Are they going to turn the corner? It's possible. We never know, but it was not worth the effort and the investment. And, a lot of people don't want to look at those red flags. So we need to do a much better job at looking into the management teams and making sure that they have a history of success. If the guy had built multiple different companies before, for example, Bill Foley is a great example of that, right? He has built many different companies before. So when he sponsors let's say PaySafe, right? Well, we can assume that he's going to bring something to the table. But when it's an unknown sponsor with a company where the CEO has never done anything, big red flag from now on. All right, in the wrap up, let's go over this one more time. The 5 exceptionally important red flags that we have to look for in the future for all of these different SPACs. The first one is going to be the fake orders. I mean, unless the company has products in the market and we know that their orders are legit, we have to take a step back and be very careful, because this one was literally making up these orders. And since they didn't have a product, the entire reason that people were investing in the company was based on that huge pipeline that they said that they had, right? So they said that they had about 2 years worth of production already in the pipeline. And that's the main reason why people were excited. There was a lot of demand for it. But now we know that most of it is not true. So this is going to be extremely important. The fake orders, we're going to be taking that into consideration. If it's not verified, then we can't take it for granted. Number 2 is fake timeline. They are very aggressive in their timeline for production or for doing this and that, when a lot of the time it doesn't take into account any potential problems. And this is crucial, because if you're going to be basing your investment, a lot of times, let's say you're buying into it at $20 or $30 based on 2025 projections, well, if the company has 2 or 3 years in delays, then you're totally overpaying for this company. So once again, as we've talked about many times with SPACs, the closer you are to $10, the more you're taking these risks into factor. Number 3 is quality control. I mean, this is pretty obvious right now, is that if you can't test the product, it has lower value. Company like Tattooed Chef, as I mentioned earlier, you can go to the store, test it out. There are a lot of different other SPACs like that. Even a pre-revenue SPAC like Holicity that wants to send out rockets in space, well, you have a video of them launching the rocket and making it almost to orbit at hundreds of kilometers in the atmosphere, right? So you know that's real, like you've seen it with your own eyes. But when it's a company that says, oh, we're going to do this, do that, it's not real. So let's take that into consideration in the future. Then you have the technology behind the company. We need to make sure that these companies are using suppliers that are credible, or they have their own proprietary technology. So there are companies out there that have hundreds of patents. That has a lot more weight, in my opinion, than this like little tiny company out of Europe that no one has ever heard of. So let's say that we're staying with the electric vehicle space. Let's say the company is working with Ford. Well, that's going to have a lot more weight than if they're working with some totally unknown brand new company whose technology is not well known in the market and hasn't been tested. And then you have the history of the management team, right? So let's compare, let's say, Nikola with Lucid Motors. A lot of people are skeptical about Lucid Motors, but if you look at it, and maybe at some point there's going to be a report on them from Hindenburg, right? Maybe it's a total scam. But if you look at the management team, you have all these guys that are from Tesla, and then you have a lot of people from Apple. Major management team that has a history of success in their respective companies. That has a lot more weight than, let's say, a Trevor Milton with Nikola that's never accomplished anything in the past, right? So I hope you guys can see like the difference here. One of them at least has a history like to justify that they're going to be able to succeed in accomplishing their product. So guys, I hope that this video really helped you. I mean, I really strongly encourage you to read through the report, especially if you were interested in the company before and if you want to like improve your due diligence in the future. I know that this helps me a lot and I hope it helps you. So let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video.